Hello and welcome to Backwards Compatible, the video game retrospective podcast where we discuss, analyze, and reflect on some of the most notable and varied titles in gaming history. I'm your host, Chase.
And I'm Garrett.
And today, we are diving into one of the most acclaimed titles in the Zelda series, Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past.
Definitely one of those highlights that we have been meaning to talk about for a little while. What is this game to you, Chase? Like in terms of the Zelda series as a whole?
Honestly, I think that this game, Link to the Past, I and many others consider this to be where the Zelda series really started to take form. This was the third game in the franchise, but you look at the first two, like the first Zelda game, I respect it more than I enjoy it. I think it's a landmark title. It started the series, and it was one of the best games on the Nintendo Entertainment System.
Mm-hmm.
But it hasn't aged all that well. Like the original Zelda, while it, again, very iconic, very influential, doesn't hold up. It is very of its time.
Okay. Yeah, kind of like like those little time capsules that are sort of buried in the ground. Would you say that this game is sort of like that, I guess, in your perspective?
I'm gonna be honest, I don't really care for the original Zelda game. I respect it, but I honestly don't really care for it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I can just hear them now, all the original Zelda fans out there shaking their canes in the air, calling for the nurse to come in because their blood pressure is getting too high.
Well, you have stirred the pot in such a fan base at times, but there are some great people in the Zelda fan base, not just saying. This game has actually made me love Zelda even more. I first played Ocarina of Time, the remake that came out on the 3DS. Ever since we were going to go over this game, it actually made me a fanboy of the series. I enjoyed it more than I thought it would.
Yeah, so this was your first time playing Link to the Past, and I'm curious, what exactly were your full thoughts on it? Like, how'd you feel about it?
Going in at first, I thought it was going to be sort of like a shorter game just because the games back then are, of course, not as extensive as they are today. I expected my assignment to kind of go in, play 5 to 10 hours, and be done with it. But it took me, I want to say, 5 hours to get to the dark world, which is the halfway point. And it shows like how much love and dedication was put into this game. Not to mention, I didn't really start, I kind of wanted to beeline everything and kind of just go through it. But the more I adventured in the world, the more I loved it, even though, it was just kind of like an old style, but I love the layout. I gotta say, like the layout of everything from the mountains to the forests, even the dungeon layouts I think are awesome, as well as the puzzles and hidden contraptions. I don't know. This game went from being something that I thought was just going to be a blow by to something that I thoroughly enjoyed.
Yeah, this game really did write the book on what not only what Zelda could be, but just RPG adventure games in general. I feel like ever since A Link to the Past, so many adventure games have taken notes from it.
Going back to the point where I said about the sort of layout of the world, just having that open world and then the rewards you get for going through that world, it makes me want to keep going.
I'm glad to hear that you really enjoyed this game, and perhaps you'll go back and finish it one of these days.
I actually do. I actually do want to finish it.
As for me, Link to the Past wasn't my first Zelda game. Like you, I started with Ocarina, and since then I've played most of the main series. I mean, I played Breath of the Wild, Majora's Mask, Twilight Princess, meaning to get to Wind Waker. So I came to Link to the Past a bit out of order, as you can tell.
Oh, really? Man, you have a lot under your belt compared to me. Only experience I had was, of course, the same game as you and Mario Kart in this game. That was it.
But I really enjoyed Link to the Past. Prior to jumping into it on my Super
Mhm,
Nintendo Mini, this game was kind of hyped up for me just because I think behind Ocarina and arguably Breath of the Wild nowadays, Link to the Past is
mhm.
often considered by Nintendo fans to be either the second best or even the best Zelda game. I think the people who consider it the best Zelda game are a little nostalgia blindsided. Don't get me wrong, it's a great game, but in the years
Mhm.
since, I think the Zelda series has gone to places that Link to the Past, while it set the series on its road, have improved on it in several ways. But again, I really enjoyed Link to the Past when I first played through it. There was just something about it that was so alluring and fascinating to me, and now, this is gonna sound really dumb, I feel like, but have you ever played a game that just feels like a video game. Like, if you were to describe what a video game is to someone, Link to the Past would be that definitive experience for me, at least. I look at A Link to the Past and I think, yep, of all the games of all time, that was one of them.
I think The Legend of Zelda is just a game that anybody can pick up, even if you're not a big gamer. It's a very casual, fun game where you still have hardships like some of the bosses, but overall, it's just a laid back, chill game for any new coming gamers, or even if you just want to take a break from all the high octane action that you get from nowadays.
This game in particular, its level design and gameplay mechanics are spelled out to the player so subtly yet so clearly that this could be someone's very first Zelda game and they can just instantly pick it up right from the get go. The game tells you without telling you what exactly you have to do. So, yeah, my overall thoughts on Link to the Past, I consider it to be maybe my how would I rank this in comparison to the other main Zelda games? My heart will always go to Ocarina. You never forget your first, and I really do like Ocarina, but then Majora's Mask I also have a lot of personal affection for. But then Breath of the
But
Wild
what
just
would you
blew me
say?
away.
Okay, Chase, but the real question it comes down to is where would you rank this in your own personal Zelda game? Like your Zelda game ranking, I mean.
Either third or fourth. Depends how I feel
Okay.
about Breath of the Wild at the moment. I love Breath of the Wild, but oh man, but then Majora's Mask and Ocarina and
Mhm.
yeah.
Which I'm sure we'll get to eventually, but with those games in mind, I think you've made your point in telling the people you really fucking love this game.
Pretty much in my top 3 or at the very least top 5.
I would say, like, in terms of general games, because I haven't played really too many Zelda games to really rank them within the franchise, I would say this game is at least top 20 in terms of what because, like, I like 3D more, but this was definitely something 2D made into 3D, which I really love. I wanna really talk about it right now.
Yeah.
Let's go.
All right, so let's get the basics out of the way. The Legend of Zelda A Link to the Past released in Japan on November 21st, 1991 for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Developed by Nintendo, of course, directed by Takashi Tezuka, and produced by Shigeru Miyamoto, as most Nintendo games are.
I don't think there is really a Nintendo fan who has not heard that name at least once or twice, even if they've just started getting into Nintendo. I
Yeah.
think even if you were like into like PlayStation or Xbox, it's just a name you know of.
Oh yeah, Miyamoto, I mean, he's basically the Walt Disney of Nintendo. He built that company's game series.
Quite a talent they have over there.
Japan in general has a lot more of a belief in authorship when it comes to gaming that I feel like a lot of Western countries don't really have, although we're kind of shifting in that direction, but discussion for another day.
Definitely.
I'll tell you what is a discussion for today, though. What was up with that Japanese commercial?
Okay. So,
The commercial Nintendo greenlit for this game in Japan is, I mean, I know it was the 90s, which was a weird time for video game advertising, but this one is just picture a bunch of Zelda characters choreographed to a Michael Jackson video, and that's basically what the commercial for A Link to the Past was. In fact, let's play a little clip for the listener ears.
ゼルダの伝説出る出る出る出るついに出るゴージャス今度の冒険リアル君もすぐに体験憎いでやんすね昆虫ショー高画質の謎解きアクショントマト
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think it's a pretty cool video. The costumes and props are really cool, especially that Ganon puppet at the end. And the song kind of slaps, but I want to be in the Nintendo marketing department when this idea was pitched.
Michael Jackson, Zelda, dance choreography. It was just that kind of commercial, which to be honest, the music slaps.
I feel like Nintendo looked back on the ad they had here in the West for the original Zelda game, the Zelda rap, and they just had to top it.
Of course.
We gotta have a whole episode dedicated to just video game commercials throughout the history of the industry. That'd be fun.
Hey, plumber boy.
So, this was the third entry into the Legend of Zelda series, and the series was going through a bit of a rough patch at the time, if for no other reason than that the second game, The Adventures of Link, was very different in terms of gameplay compared to the first game, and really all of Zelda games since then. It was a bit more of a platformer in comparison to an adventure game, so it was kind of weird.
It was kind of like that bridge to it, but I think it was a safe choice to kind of stick to the platform that so many people were used to. You know what I mean? Because back then we had ourselves some Mario just because that's what people were so used to. And so people could pick up the game, but it also did some things I feel that were revolutionary for the time, to be honest.
And just to prove that point, when it came to the Super Nintendo, Nintendo's second mainline console, this game, alongside Super Mario World, were intended to be showcases of the Super Nintendo's power compared to its predecessor, the NES, both in terms of graphical quality and audio quality. Let's just talk about the art style. The 16-bit era, this game is gorgeous.
It's downright amazing the technology that came up with this. And can we talk for a quick side bit about Link's hair? Why was it purple?
I thought it was pink. Am I colorblind?
Either way, that's such a funky color when I looked at him because, I'm always used to seeing him being a blonde.
Yeah, the pink hair is a bit odd nowadays, looking back on it, considering Link's been blonde throughout the entirety of Zelda, as far as I know. So going back to the time when he was a bit more on the neon side is a bit interesting and took some getting used to. Since you brought it up, let's talk about Link in this game.
Let's see here. Let's talk about the big elephant in the room. Why is this boy saving the world? That's so much responsibility on somebody. The uncle was like, yo, my guy, take this sword, go save the princess, and then just goes. Now this dude is just going all around Hyrule. Like, what
Whoa.
is this dude made of?
Actually, if you played Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, you would know that Link and Zelda are the reincarnations of the goddess of
I know
Hylia.
he's always destined, but it's still, I'm sure Link didn't know that he was this destined person to take down Ganon.
Link is the archetypical video game hero protagonist, you know? He's the brave knight. He's the warrior that saves the day and triumphs over evil. He's the brave hero you hear about in fairy tales. He saves the princess, slays the demon, and wields the greatest sword in the world.
That sounded like a most interesting man commercial that you were selling there.
Most interesting Hyrulean. Yeah, as for his design in this game, not a big fan of it, like I said. Don't dislike it, but I'm just used to his later, more 3D version incarnation. So his little kinda, not really chibi, but a little on the adorable side. I think Link in this game, he kind of looks kind of cute, you know? I
Mhm.
like the little animations that play whenever he charges and bumps into a wall and jumps back, or he falls down into a pit. He's just like a startled, confused little sweet potato boy, and yeah, I kind of dig Link in this game. He's just, yeah, it's like you said, he's a youngish kid who's had this big adventure more or less thrust upon him, and he's doing his best. He's trying, okay? It's okay,
You know,
Link. You go when you feel like it.
another side piece to this side piece, but what is with Nintendo games and sending out little children into the world of danger?
I mean, I feel like that's just Japan culture in general. I mean, look at anime. If you're not married with 7 kids and president of the world by the time you're 15, then what are you doing with your life?
Checkmate losers, I guess.
Here's a little tidbit. In Japan, it was originally titled Triforce of the Gods, but when it was translated into English, and as well as a few of European countries, it was changed to A Link to the Past to avoid any controversial religious connotations.
Oh, wow. Well, definitely back then, it was a different time for Western countries. I can see how that title would really lead to some conflicts, but I am glad that at least with that name change, most of the world got to see what this game was.
Yeah, although it did kind of confuse me at first to the title A Link to the Past, because it made me think going to the Dark World was actually time traveling back in time or something, not actually a parallel timeline or something, so it kind of tripped me up
Mhm.
there. Going back to
Yeah.
what I said earlier about this game being a power showcase for the Super Nintendo, we talked about the graphical quality, and just to tie that little conversation up in a bow, it does look really impressive just for the time, and even today, like if you told me that this was a small little indie game, I would believe you. Like the art style, a lot of indie games today look just like this game, partially out of due to its influence since then, but still.
Mhm.
And just as in with graphics, the music to this game was top notch, stellar. The music for this game was composed by Koji Kondo, and the score to this game is just so many themes just stick in your head. A lot of them have been reused throughout the entire Zelda series.
Oh, yes.
This game marked the
Mhm,
first use of the Hyrule Castle theme, and
mhm.
perhaps most notably, Zelda's Lullaby theme. This version's pretty good, although, again, Ocarina's version will always be my personal favorite, but whenever I hear Zelda's Lullaby, it just captures that sense of childhood innocence, the sense of we're just kids making memories, having a good time, ignorant of all the danger in the world or what our destinies are. We're just here in this moment, enjoying the company of each other as friends, as lovers. We're just two people who
Man,
just
you're getting really into it, bud.
Zelda's
Yeah.
Lullaby is just one of those songs that hits me in the feels every time. It's just a very emotional song. But it's not the only song that stood out to me. The overworld theme that you hear all across Hyrule, the da 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 da. I just really like that one as well. There's also the Sanctuary theme, which plays in the Sanctuary, the church, and it's
Mm.
both a calming song, but also a very eerily haunting song as well.
Yeah, I kinda got a creepy vibe mostly from that place, and for good thing too, because I don't know, just see like, that music so that music really kinda also told the story. I'm glad that the music tells the story as you move along. It's great, and I love the transitions it makes too.
Two more songs that also I really like, especially this version, are the Kakariko Village theme. This is, I consider this to be my favorite version of the Kakariko theme. It just feels so cozy and homey. Yeah, this is my sleepy little village. It's just another day in the life in this fantasy world. And the other theme I really enjoy is the Dark World theme. But it's not just the music that this game's legacy lives on throughout the series, because Link to the Past also marked the first time the Master Sword debuted.
Oh boy, getting this after finding all those pendants was quite a treat. It made you feel a sense of I am a hero, you know?
Yeah. The first time I played through this game, I'm so used to games like Ocarina or Breath of the Wild where you get the Master Sword considerably later in the game than you do in this one. So getting it this relatively early on, I was like, oh, well, we have the Master Sword already? That was quick.
That's what I thought it was going to be like in terms of the length of the game. I just go and I get all these pendants and then I get the master sword and I go defeat the evil wizard and then that's the end of it. Granted, there's a lot of steps going from the master sword to defeating the big bad evil wizard.
Ah, the Master Sword. What is there to say about it? Much like how Link is the archetypical video game hero, the Master Sword is the video game sword, you know? It's not too unique in terms of its design. I mean, picture a sword. Yep, that's what it looks like, but it doesn't have to be anything more. It is the game sword.
The thing is, this design of the sword sort of stuck with it as it went through many different titles, all the way from, well, A Link to the Past to Breath of the Wild. That just goes to show how good of a design this was. When you see that sword, you think of Link, you think of Hyrule, you think of defeating the evil. That's what I get.
Like you said, the moment you draw it in the middle of the forest, it's just such a powerful, heroic moment. It just instills in you the sense of, I'm a hero now.
Exactly.
It's also a major upgrade compared to the fighter sword, the sword that your dying uncle gives you, because it can shoot laser beams from it at full health.
That was, like, quite an interesting mechanic that I personally loved. It made me seem like, it's just an amazing ability is all. It just makes you seem pretty badass.
You can upgrade the sword later after reuniting the two dwarven blacksmith brothers, and they'll upgrade the master sword to be even more powerful and red.
Red is, like, a big color in this in terms of upgrading stuff. Like, for example, when I got my shield to be fireproof, finally got just a red shield, and I'm kinda like how the colors change as you go from place to place, and
Yeah, because you can also find two different sets of armor tunics that Link can wear. You start off with the iconic green look of Link, and then you eventually get the blue tunic, which improves your defense, and eventually the red tunic, which significantly improves your defense even more.
yep, red is kinda like the ultimate color in this game.
It was also the first time the aforementioned Kakariko Village appeared in a Zelda game. It was the first time that a lot of enemy types appeared. The reason I and many others consider this to be the foundation for all future Zelda games is because of just how so much of the later games take inspiration or direct influence from A Link to the Past.
Exactly. And I think the magical aspect of the Link to the Past, it's sort of like, okay, I love how it is magic. Magic is in the world, but it's not like super abundant to where it's like we see people just going around casting spells and whatnot. It's just people living their daily lives, but are sometimes oppressed by people who are given that power or have obtained it through dire means, such as Ganon.
That's always kind of been the sort of setting vibe of the Zelda games. Magic exists and is fairly commonplace, but for the average Joe, it's not really a part of their day-to-day life. Magic is this sort of thing that exists on the fringes of civilization.
Exactly.
All right, so diving into this story. Long ago, the evil demon Ganon seized control of the Triforce, a mystical artifact in the sacred realm. This prompted the king of Hyrule to order 7 wise and powerful sages to seal the sacred realm away, Ganon along with it, never to be seen again. Centuries later, however, Hyrule is at unease. The evil wizard Aghanim has assassinated the king of Hyrule and has abducted the descendants of the 7 sages, the Maidens. He then plans to break the seal and obtain the Triforce. Enter our hero, Link.
So, where the game starts off is we start in the home of Link. Technically his uncle's, but it won't really be his uncle's for long.
One of the few times Link has a actual family member with him.
I know, and I'm surprised we don't really get too many appearances. I don't even think I don't know. Is there other games that where he has an appearance of a family member at least? Because I know in like some comics they do.
I think in Wind Waker he has some family, but
Okay, sounds good then. So as Link wakes up, he hears Zelda's voice, and Zelda basically tells him, "Hey, I'm in trouble. Come to Hyrule Castle. I'm in the prison."
which makes
Mhm.
me wonder, are Link and Zelda bonded because the whole Triforce descendant thing? But I think Link's uncle also hears the same message because he rushes out to Hyrule Castle, so that kind of made me wonder, did anyone within a certain radius hear Zelda's plea and they're like, oh fuck, schizophrenia again?
Maybe they were just like, must have been the wind.
But yeah, I think it's because, Link and Zelda are just bonded through destiny, which is why he heard her. But anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, you make your way over to Hyrule Castle,
In the
and
middle of a thunderstorm, so
oh
atmospheric.
yes, very much so. And of course, there's plenty of guards. And to be honest, the guards were like pretty cool starting out. They were kind of just chilling and talking with you. That will be the only time you'll ever see like some chill soldiers. As you go, you kind of find a secret passage into the castle, and you go in there, and oh no, Link's uncle is pretty much dead. Like he's almost dead. But the uncle tells him, take the sword and shield and go save Zelda. There we go. That's our first sword and shield, and we hardly ever got to know our uncle.
Oh no, Uncle, what's his name? Oh, he was not long for this world. Oh, but cool sword though. Thanks, bye.
Yeah, pretty much. That's what it felt like. Next, we just sort of travel through. We save Zelda from the prison, and we go take her into the sanctuary. And now we're
Well,
out in this.
hold on.
Oh,
Let's talk about this first dungeon, you could call it, the tutorial dungeon of Hyrule Castle.
ugh, those mice were so annoying, man. I think they were the most annoying enemy in dungeons or bats.
I hinted at it earlier, but the level design and layout of this game is phenomenally well done. And I
Mhm.
feel like this dungeon spells it out perfectly. It tells you exactly where you have to go without any indication or sign. It leaves it up to the player to deduce, oh, I notice how it's laid out. Clearly, I have to go this way, based purely on the visuals of the game itself, telling you where to go.
You can't go through walls.
Well, yeah. Not just in terms of like the map or whatever, but also gameplay itself. The game encourages you to check out this chest that's sitting very conspicuously on a pedestal, and that teaches you, hey, be sure to look out for these chests. Also, see these pots? Why don't you break them that are so obviously laid out and so very tempting? Hey, look, there's items inside these pots.
It's a great tutorial, to be honest. One of the best tutorials I've had in games that actually made me at least feel like I knew 60% of the game coming out of it.
Like I said, it says so much about the game without saying a single bit of dialogue to you, other than your uncle saying, "Don't forget the sacred art of our people. Spin."
Be super spinny like a Beyblade.
The spin attack, though, so if you hold down the attack button, Link will hold the sword and eventually spin. It's very useful when dealing with large groups of enemies. It's also in this dungeon that you unlock your first couple of items. The lamp, which allows you to light up torches
Mhm.
and, have visibility in dark areas, and the trusty boomerang, one of Zelda series' most signature items.
Gotta say, I did like the boomerang, but it got to a point where I just relied on my bow and arrow. But
It's kind of made obsolete by the bow and arrow later on, but when you first
Mhm.
get it, again, another instance of how clever this game tells you without telling you is in order after you get the boomerang, you have a little bit of a, I guess, mini boss fight against the knight guarding Zelda in the dungeon. You can't really get close to him because he's swinging that giant flail around, so your sword isn't the way to go. But then you remember that boomerang I just picked up. What if I used it? And lo and behold, it stuns him long enough for you to just beat the shit out of him.
Mhm.
It's the game telling you all these items you're unlocking, be sure to use them against challenging enemies.
Exactly. Make sure to use the tools that you're given. Especially during the dungeon, there's a part where you now have to start using your lantern to kind of light up the areas.
Yeah, it's the secret passageway behind the throne where Zelda's like, go here through the secret tunnel, but be careful, it's dark in there. And there's rats
Pretty much.
and
Well,
snakes and bats.
oh yeah. There's this one room where like five snakes like charge you. They charge you really quick. And then yeah, you go through this fun little dungeon and you eventually end up at the sanctuary. And the sanctuary is where you meet I can't remember that guy's name.
Well, in the English version, he's like the wise or trusty sage or something, but in the original
Yeah,
Japanese version, he's the priest. But again, changed due to we can't have our children learning about religion.
yeah, so we meet him and he's like, "Hey, I'll look after Zelda. You try to find some wise men." Good thing is that on the map it actually points out to where you're supposed to go in the main quest. So it was nice to know exactly which house I was supposed to go to and exactly where I was supposed to go because I think I would have been lost in that entire world, just like being aimlessly wandered.
That begs the argument, can this be considered a pseudo open world game, a sort of precursor to the genre?
It definitely set up a template, and it had so much rich findings, and it did have sort of like to me, it showed the life of the people through what they were wearing, and as well as the way the character models moved and how they yelled for the guards, and as well as ones that are just kind of kick back and want you to promote some glass bottles.
Halt,
um,
citizen! You have violated the law!
yeah.
Kakariko Village. I like this quaint little medieval fantasy village off to the side of Hyrule. Although, like you said, the villagers are scared of Link because they consider him a criminal because of Aghanim. Aghanim spreading anti-Link propaganda everywhere. Also, in when you're in Kakariko Village, do not attack the Cuckoos. They will attack back.
Yeah, that is a good warning.
Speaking of Easter eggs, in one of the houses in the village, did you notice one of the portraits on the wall?
Mm-mm.
Well, there's a little painting of a certain mustache plumber boy.
Oh no, really?
Yeah, I mean, Nintendo, they're gonna put in a little cheeky reference to the Mario franchise, but yeah, I thought that was
Mhm.
kind of cute.
Yeah, I like it when games give shout outs.
Not the last time Mario will find himself in a portrait.
Back to the fun little story. You go to that house that the arrow was pointing to, but he's not there. So then you start talking around town, and eventually you find out he's actually across the map in I can't remember what it is, but it's by the
The Eastern
Temple
Palace.
of Courage. Oh yeah, the Eastern Palace. That's what they called it. Here's the thing, you can take some paths, you can actually start exploring around as you go over there. I want to say actually as soon as you start and you kind of figure out all these secrets and you're like kind of figuring out the world as you're testing everything.
And as you gain different equipment and unlocked abilities, you can explore even more of the world. For instance, one of the first items you get here are the Pegasus boots, which allow you to run super fast and charge.
And not to mention, you can destroy broken walls. Like you'll kind of see the cracks in the walls where you can run right into them and boom.
And you obtain said Pegasus boots after completing the Eastern Palace dungeon, which is where Link meets said village elder he's been looking for. Sahasrala? Sahasrala, I think his name is?
Yeah, Sahasrara, one of the elders, the old wise men that the priest was talking about.
And he basically puts Link aside and is like, "Listen here, boy. Well, you can't be going after the Master Sword all willy-nilly. You need to prove yourself. You need to get 3 magic pendants of virtue, boy."
And here comes the pendants, the pendant of courage, the pendant of power, and the pendant of, is it wisdom? Yeah, pendant of wisdom.
3 virtues that will be more attributed to the Triforce in future games.
You go to the courage. This dungeon layout I really enjoyed. So first, in every single dungeon pretty much, keys are very important, but there's also the big key. If you get the big key, and some places I think require 2 big keys, right? Or something like that.
Yeah, also don't forget the dungeon map.
Oh yeah, they also give you a map with all the levels as well as the compass, which will tell you which level the boss is on. So that's pretty nice in case you need some help navigating, or you can just kind of ignore that. It's sort of good to have that in the background, just in case you're kind of like, this is getting annoying. Let me whip out my map.
The Eastern Palace dungeon is also where you face your first real boss fight. The, what were they? The Armos Knights?
I can't remember. I just know there were 6 knights. Basically
Yeah.
these 6 knights that did fun little attack patterns. Like for example, they sort of did like a little dance. They kind of went into the middle of the room. They expanded it out. They did a little half circle, and then they all went into a line of 6 to start bouncing towards you. Which it's one of the more easier boss fights compared to the rest. But it is your first boss, so they're
Yeah.
not going to be super hard on you. It also shows you look out for these patterns because each boss will have some sort of pattern, and it's just up to you to kind of figure that out and get better at fighting that boss, and you'll be able to win them.
Yeah, the
So
Armos Knights are fairly straightforward and easy boss fight, but I feel like it's more to reaffirm the gameplay philosophy of, hey, remember that special item you picked up 10 minutes ago? Use it here. In this case, you have to use the bow to defeat the knights.
it just makes the fight way much easier. Just saying, guys.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's the intent. Like you
Mhm.
said, the bow, another one of Link's signatures, and one of the most useful items in this game. It kind of makes the boomerang a bit obsolete in terms of what your ranged combat options are, but I think it's a pretty useful item.
After you defeat this boss, you get a fun little heart that you get to add to your collection. Now, hearts are important in this game because throughout the world, there's parts of hearts. And I think you have to collect 4. Is that right? 4 in order to get 1 heart. And
Yeah,
basically it just increases your health.
yeah,
But after every boss fight, you get at least 1 heart.
this is another instance of Link to the Past setting the template for all Zelda games going forward, because heart containers weren't in the first 2 Zelda games, but you can be damn sure they're in every future other Zelda game.
And I'm glad that it is. It kind of is leveling up in a way.
Yeah,
Kind of
it
giving
keeps the game well balanced and at your own pace.
exactly. So then you finally get the pendant of courage. Falls right on down upon you with a light shining through. You get the fun music. It goes like "Da-da, da-da, 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 da-da," and it's just like "Da, da, 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 da."
So triumphant.
Yeah, I know, and I love it. It made me feel great. Not gonna lie, every single time.
Especially later in the game when you defeat some really tough bosses and then you hear that little tune and you're like, I did it.
Hmm.
After this point, after you cleared this Eastern Palace, you have your choice of 2 other palaces you can go to, 2 other dungeons, the Desert Palace down south or the Tower of Hera up north in the mountains.
Which one did you go to first? I went to the desert down south.
Yeah, I think the game does subtly encourage you to play the Desert Palace first before the Tower of Hera, just in terms of the map layout, but I think it does speak to the confidence in the game design that you can do these out in any order. There's not a specific linear path that you have to follow.
It's great. I don't know. I really love when game worlds can come together and sort of breaking in terms of dialogue and the way the NPCs act. It's just like it happens, but it's not going to be game breaking if you do it in the it's not really wrong order, it's just a different order.
The Desert Palace is way down in the middle of a desert, and there's vultures that can fly above you, and those little bastards are so hard to hit.
No kidding. I think they were the most annoying. I just kept running, to be honest. Once I got those Pegasus boots, I ran past a lot of enemies.
In order to gain entryway to the Desert Palace, you have to get a special book that allows you to read the pillar in front of it in order to open the door.
It was made by a Discord mod.
So you have to go all the way back to Kakariko Village's library to get the book. And while it is a little tedious in having to go back there, again, it's a nice little side quest, sort of. And it, once again, speaks that it doesn't specifically tell you where to find the book. You have to remember, where were their books? Oh, yeah, that one library in the village. It's probably in there.
Do you guys even read?
Well, given the literacy rates of medieval times.
Probably not.
The Desert Palace, pretty cool. This is also where you, what were the items you unlocked here?
These strong fists that allowed you to move stone.
Right. The Power Glove.
Yeah, that was it. This is the pendant of strength.
You get it after defeating the boss of this dungeon, Landmolus, big ol' sandworm.
By the way, kind of look where you can find the ice rod because it can really help you in this battle.
After that, it's off to the Tower of Hera. On the way up this mountain, this is where you encounter the first portal to the Dark World. And oh
Definitely.
man, the sound that plays whenever you enter the Dark World. It perfectly encapsulates that sense of you are entering another dimension.
And it definitely gives you an entirely different vibe going to that parallel universe, as we mentioned earlier.
Why am I a bunny rabbit?
Yeah, I know. So that was kind of weird. I thought I was like going to be Bugs Bunny for every single second until what's that one item? Like, it's kind of like after you complete this sort of dungeon.
The Moon Pearl.
Yeah, the Moon Pearl. The Moon Pearl is what puts you back into your old form, as in being a human instead of being some really huge rabbit.
So, as you venture across the Dark World, you find other people from the Light World that, like Link, accidentally got teleported here. And because they don't have the Moon Pearl with them, they are transformed into these bizarre, weird-looking creatures. With Link having the Moon Pearl, he's able to retain his normal form. The Dark World is not only an entirely separate dimension to Hyrule, and it's where the second half of the game primarily takes place, but it can also be used as a form of transportation compared to Hyrule, where you can get to places that you wouldn't normally be able to in the Light World, like right here at the Tower of Hera. In order to get to the tower, you have to go through the Dark World to a plateau that in the Light World is blocking your path, but it isn't there in the Dark World, so you can just walk over it.
Yeah, I really love that in terms of its entirety, the map is still the same. Everything that's in the world, as well as the pathways, have all changed, which kept things because you already kind of went around everywhere finding these pendants.
The Dark World, the timeline where Ganon rules. Everything is dark, depressing, and just very, very 1980s dark fantasy-esque. There's monsters everywhere, everything's just gone to hell. Not a nice place.
No, even the village is very different. Like I think it's called the Village of Outcasts now.
And everyone's a jerk.
Yeah, everyone's a booty over there. And like everyone was they weren't nice before, but at least they kind of tolerated you, or at least nice to put on a smiley face. It kind of made me disheartened a little bit to see how this fun little village turned into something like a bandit town.
There's a really melancholic, depressing side quest that takes place around here where there's a forest nearby Kakariko Village in the Light World, and when you go in there, you see a group of animals huddled around a young boy playing on a flute, or if the design is anything to go off of, an ocarina. But unfortunately, in the light world, whenever Link tries to approach the boy, he disappears. He's just an apparition. And it's here in the dark world that you meet him, and he's been transformed into this weird aardvark looking thing. And he laments that he'll never be able to return home. He's stuck like this in this other universe. And he tells you, I buried my whistle in the light world. Go find it and bring it to my father. So you do that, you dig it up using the shovel, and this little side quest can take a minute if you don't know where it's at.
Hmm.
And then you take it to the boy's father, and he gets all sad, like he realizes his son is gone forever. You play the flute, and his son turns into a tree.
Hmm. That's really depressive, man.
Yeah, it's the father letting go, accepting the fact that his son is never coming back. So he tells you, keep the whistle and go play it in the middle of the village. So you do that, and that's where you meet the boy's pet duck, who can fly and basically acts as a fast travel system.
That's how they decide to put in this little gear in this machine of a game. Like,
Remember, every time you fast travel, you're using a dead boy's pet. His father looks out at Link flying away on the duck and just cries to himself.
gotta love it.
I really like that side quest because it just really adds to the melancholic, bittersweet atmosphere of this game, especially as far as the Dark World is concerned. Anyway, the Tower of Hera, this is where the game really introduces you to the gameplay mechanic of verticality, because there are different floors in certain dungeons where you have to go up or down, and you can fall between floors if you're not careful.
Very much so.
And this boss fight, Moldorm, the big centipede thing, was super annoying my first time playing because I just kept getting pushed off and falling and having to climb all the way back and start the whole fight over again.
Yeah, I would say that's one of the most annoying parts. Also, like, he moves diagonally, which not too many of the bosses really moved like he does.
Anyway, after you defeat Moldorm, you get the final Pendant of Virtue, and you have to return back to Saharassal, whatever his name was.
Yeah, that guy.
He sends you off to retrieve the Master Sword.
In all your triumphant glory.
Congratulations, Link, you have been promoted to true hero. You return to Sanctuary, but you find out the priest is dead and Zelda's been kidnapped by Aghanim, who plans to send her to the Dark World to complete his master plan.
Yep, kind of a big uh-oh.
Oh, right, we forgot to mention one of the most important items you can buy throughout the game: bombs.
Oh yeah, dude, bombs are so useful in this game. I don't think I've ever gone into a dungeon without at least having 8 bombs.
One of the Zelda series' most iconic weapons are the bombs. You just plop down a little bomb and you can wipe out enemies with it. You can unlock hidden passageways. It's just an all around very useful tool.
Definitely, like, blowing up stuff is really cool.
Anyway, you once again fight your way through the Hyrule Castle, you make your way to Aghanim, but unfortunately, Link is too late to save Zelda. Aghanim teleports her to the Dark World and boasts that the sacred seal has been broken. So then you have to challenge Aghanim to a boss fight.
How did you do on this boss fight?
Pretty good, actually. I immediately picked up the mechanic that you have to reflect his attacks back at him, because again, becomes a staple of Zelda bosses going forward, especially with Ganondorf in Ocarina. So you just have to more or less dodge Aghanim's attacks, wait for him to shoot a fireball, and then just swing your sword and bounce it right back at his big stupid face.
Pretty much, kind of like my baseball skills came in here really quick. To be honest, I want to say that's the only way I could actually hit him. I wish there was more attacks that could actually hit him. Like maybe
Yeah.
like the boomerang or something.
But after you defeat Aghanim, he basically rage quits on you and teleports you to the Dark World. So this is the point where you can now travel a bit freely between the Dark World and Light World, because you meet an old man in the mountains where he gives you a magic mirror that allows you to teleport between worlds.
That also opened up an entirely different dynamic.
I like the concept of it being a mirror. It just really adds to the whole fantasy logic.
Do you think he sees the dark world when he looks into the mirror and then sees the light world when he's in the dark world?
Hadn't really considered that, but probably.
But you could use it to kind of traverse different areas in the light world, like how Chase was saying earlier. Different areas in the dark world are now more reachable compared to the others. well, since you have now that mirror, you can kind of just switch back and forth when need be.
The fact that there's a whole other world for you to explore, and yeah, it's pretty much the same layout as Hyrule, just with a few minor geographical edits and everything, but it's still a really cool concept.
Hmm.
At this point, Saharasala contacts Link and tells him, now that you have full access to the Dark World, you can rescue Zelda and the other maidens in order to reseal Ganon away. So now,
Maidens?
well, yeah, now you have to go find the maidens and complete 7 more dungeons, starting with the Dark Palace.
Dum dum
Well,
dum.
Palace of Darkness, my
How
bad.
dare you get that wrong?
This is where I'm pretty sure you unlock the hammer.
Yeah, I think you do. It's like the red mallet looking sucker.
I really like the hammer because you can find a few like rods that are blocking your path throughout the world, and you have to use the hammer to squish them down. And I like it. It's very satisfying. It's a very nice little game of whack a mole. Like most items you encounter in the dungeon, you have to use it to defeat said dungeon's boss. And this boss, the Helmasaur King, one of my favorite bosses in the game. This big dinosaur triceratops thing with a big helmet shield mask. And you have to use the hammer to break it and then blow it up with bombs. Really fun boss. After defeating the Helmasaur King, you rescue the maiden. And she just says, yeah, thanks for rescuing me, Link. Now go find the other ones. Yeah, it's the early 90s, you know. Women aren't they don't have much agency. Don't think about
Yeah,
it too hard that we are literally objectifying them by putting them into crystals and all that. Don't dwell on that.
yeah. How many crystals did we have to find? I think it was like 8?
7, including
7.
Zelda.
Yeah, just a lot of bosses that you have to go through with that one. And
We have to talk about one of my favorite dungeons, the Swamp Palace.
okay, yeah, let's talk about that one. Isn't the swamps like right by where sort of like where the dungeon of the desert is, like the strength pendant is down the south?
You could have entered a little bit of it earlier when you had to go to the desert palace. You have to drain the water, and those poor fish in the ponds outside.
Oh yeah.
Like, Link is a dick to them. He just drains their home, and they're just flopping around when you exit. Just, what did they ever do to you, Link?
They were in the water.
I know water dungeons, especially in Zelda, have a bit of infamous legacy, but I really like this one. I thought the Swamp Palace was really cool. It also has one of my favorite boss fights, Argus.
Let's talk about Argus's design.
Yeah, he's a kind of like a Lovecraftian looking thing. He's this big tentacle eyeball thing, jellyfish, and he's got a bunch of like mini versions of him that act as like his living shields.
Argus was definitely okay. I love the monsters that are like just a singular eyeball with maybe some additional appendages, but in this case, it's like a jellyfish with an eye. I don't know. It to me, it's just kind of cute.
I really like this fight because this is the point where you get the hook shot, and you have to use the hook shot to grab the little baby versions around him in order to expose him. That would get paralleled in Majora's Mask with a similar boss fight where you have to use the hook shot again in a very similar method. So, yeah, another instance of Link to the Past legacy living on.
Hmm.
The hook shot, one of my favorite items. It's a grappling hook that you can stun enemies, you can drag enemies to you, you can hook onto certain ledge points and grapple across dungeons. Just a fun, cool item.
Now I really have to go back and finish the game for myself.
Oh, yeah, man, you really got to finish this game, and don't lie to me like you did with Doom. So, from the Swamp Palace, you're encouraged to go to Skull Woods, which is the same forest area where you got the Master Sword, but this time in the Dark World. One of the more forgettable dungeons, in my opinion. Like, I completely forgot which boss it was to this one. I think it was not Mothra, Mothula.
The zingy boy, like he just flies really fast all around the dungeon.
I think this is where you get the fire rod.
Reaching back to Pokemon, fire is very effective to bug.
I do like the lead up to Skull Woods though, because it's very like its namesake. It's a dark, creepy forest with a bunch of skeletons and skulls everywhere. It's really very dark fantasy.
I mean, that's what we're asking for in the dark world, right? Just the exact opposite of a just kind of like a more edgier version.
Yeah, this is where you get the fire rod, and once you get it, once you encounter Mothula, you're just like, kill it with fire!
Hasta la vista, baby.
One of the more annoying boss fights because the whole floor is like a big conveyor belt forcing you into these spikes at the edge of the arenas, and you're just trying to swing against Mothula. Yeah, I didn't really care for this dungeon outside of its aesthetic all that much.
I probably would have died to that probably more than 5 times, to be honest.
Fortunately, there. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention. There's throughout Hyrule, you can find fairy fountains.
Fairy fountains, I think, were just a place where you kind of recuperated, right? And also, there were some that you could throw some rupees in, and hopefully,
Yeah.
the fairy will give you some love.
Yeah, while we're here, let's talk about a few other things that kind of not side quests, but just like nice little things hidden throughout the game that you can get upgrades. There's fairy fountains, which are several hidden throughout the world. You go in and the fairies will heal you. You can also put fairies in a bottle, and when you let them out, they'll heal you. But kind of rude of Link. He's just going up to these fairies and trapping them like fireflies and is like, "You're my friend now."
I'm going to take you out of this cave that is your home and put you into the dark world. Have fun.
There's one, the mysterious pond, I think it is, where you can throw certain items in. Like, I think you can throw the bow in, and the great fairy inside the pond will upgrade them. But you have to tell the truth to her. She'll be like, "Did you throw this item in here, young man?" And if you're like, "No, I'm sorry," she'll be like, "Liar!" But if you just tell the truth, she'll be like, "Well, I appreciate your honesty. Here you go. I made it better."
It's a nice little upgrade, and that's how I was able to get my shield up to its fire resistant powers.
Also, way up in the northeast corner of Hyrule, up the river, you can find the Zoro's domain, these fish people by a waterfall. And if you pay the King Zora 500 rupees, I think it was, he gives you the Zora's flippers, which allow you to swim and take whirlpools.
That's a very useful item, and I'm so glad that I could finally traverse through the entirety of the overworld, you know?
I think it speaks a lot to this capitalistic society of Hyrule that Link had to pay 500 well earned rupees in order to learn how to swim.
Talk about expensive swimming lessons.
This is extortion.
And then there were also like the fun little tidbits where you could find these small little huts or maybe some stumps where people will ask you, "Hey, give me 20 rupees and you can open one of these chests. Maybe you'll get more, maybe you'll get less." It's
Yeah.
called gambling.
Tell you what's not a scam though, the Witch's Hut. The Witch's Hut is this nice little area you find on the way to Zora's domain in the northeast side, and it serves as a really cool base of operations for that region because I think it's a fast travel point. But you can also buy potions there, health and magic potions. You can grind the leaves outside for some extra rupees, and the witch herself is very nice. It's just a pleasant little hideaway.
It's definitely somewhere where I would just like to live in the world, to be honest, because like it's not too far from society, but it's just enough.
What is this fifth verse, same as the first? You defeat the boss, you get a new item, you've rescued the maiden, yada yada yada.
Mm-hmm.
From here, you move on to the village of outcasts, which is what Kakariko village is in the dark world, and this is just a mean town. Everyone here is a jerk.
Oh yeah, we talked about the outcasts.
You find the dungeon, the Thieves Town dungeon. One of the more interesting dungeons, if for nothing else, than the maiden is a little bit different in that you rescue her before you actually fight the boss.
Just that way it keeps you on your toes, I guess.
Yeah, or it could be that she's not actually the maiden, and once you walk through a beam of light with her following you, she turns into this demon blind. So yeah, it turns out she's not the maiden. Whoopsie daisy.
Here I go killing again.
Link just sharpening his sword. Shame. This is a cool boss, blind. You have to use the light in order to defeat him.
You said blind?
Yeah, blind. He's a really cool boss. He's this floating ghost specter that shoots fire, and you have to attack his head whenever it's disconnected from his body. And from here, we move on to what is perhaps the worst dungeon in the entire game, and I know I'm not alone in that opinion, because I hated it the first time I played this game, and in fact, I hated it this time. This is as far as I got to on this playthrough. I just stopped at this dungeon. The Ice Dungeon.
Ooh.
So the Ice Dungeon is super slippery. You have to use magic, the fire rod, in order to defeat most enemies in this dungeon. And it's just not fun to play. It's annoying, it's tedious, it's repetitive. You run out of magic way too quickly and you gotta go get some more. I just really didn't care for this dungeon. Although the boss, Cold Stare, was kind of cool. This floating eye and an iceberg glacier kind of thing. That was a fun boss. But yeah, I just hated this dungeon.
So
Yeah, this is just the point where for this playthrough, I'm like, yeah, I know what happens after this. I'm not going through this hell again.
I think it was just kind of like, okay, we're kind of getting burned out, so let's throw some fun little tidbits in here. Just make it somewhat difficult, and then it turned out to be really fucking annoying. That's what it sounds like.
From here, you move on to Misery Mire, another one of my favorite dungeons.
Now, Misery Mire. Okay, that sounds like a place full of misery. What makes it so miserable, Chase?
There's a lot of areas you can fall off at.
I'm already not liking it.
I personally really liked it. I thought this one was really well laid out.
Like, was the boss good?
Yeah, Vitreous. He's a bunch of eyeballs. A lot of eyeball bosses now that I think about it. He's this goopy eyeball mesh thing, and you gotta shoot arrows at him.
Yeah, doesn't he like throw eyeballs out? Yeah, like his little minion eyeballs.
Yeah, he's like Argus. He can also shoot lightning, which caught me off
Mhm.
guard the first time I played. I'm like, that's not what eyeballs are supposed to do.
Maybe that's Thor's eyeball, just shocking out from the realm of Asgard.
He has special eyes.
You have very pretty eyes.
Anyway, once again, defeat the boss, get a heart container, rescue the maiden.
And then what?
Well, we move on to the final dungeon. Well, not the final dungeon, but the final maiden dungeon. Turtle Rock.
That turtle was, it looked like such a behemoth.
This is another one that I didn't care for the first time I played, but the second time I played it a while back, I actually found myself really liking what this dungeon's doing. I really like the platforms, I like the layout. I like how there's speaking of Mario references from earlier, there's a couple of chain chomps sitting around in this dungeon.
Fun little traps. But it
And
also relates to the boss too. Like
yeah,
those.
Trinex, the three-headed Hydra rock elemental turtle.
Now this looked like it got a lot of love, and I
Ye-
enjoy every single part of its design.
Yeah, so he has three heads. He's got a normal rock head, an ice head, and a fire head. You have to use your sword plus the fire and ice rods, respectively, in order to defeat all three of his heads. And he's also one of the only bosses that has, I guess you could argue he has a second form, because after you defeat the three heads, he turns into this worm-looking thing.
Onyx?
Yeah, he turns into Onyx.
Yeah, basically. Like that little snake looking boy just slithering around. He's a slithery snake.
Finally, all maidens are rescued, and it's time to defeat Aghanim once and for all. So, you go and defeat him at the top of his tower, but after slaying Aghanim, it's revealed that he was actually Ganon all along.
No,
Who would have
it's a-
ever suspected?
And then he turns into a bat. He's Batman.
I thought it was kind of creepy the first time it happened. Like, after you defeat Aghanim, Ganon's ghost unpossesses him or whatever and just flies away. And I'm just like, wasn't expecting that to happen.
Flies away, drops into a pyramid that's where Hyrule Castle is in the, I want to call it the overworld or the
Yeah,
regular
the
world.
Pyramid of Power.
Yep, Pyramid of Power is where it drops in, and that's actually sort of like the last place that you'll be venturing into. You go there, and you have this fun little battle with Ganon. To be honest, at least it looked fun.
Yeah, it's a really cool boss fight. I like Ganon's design. I do like how it captures the demonic pig monster form of Ganon, but I prefer his later incarnations of like Ganondorf and his more demon-ish form. But the pig form, it's an oldie but a goodie. It's a classic design for him.
Yeah, it's kind of like, okay, kind of like the design makes him look a little bit more like a joke compared to his later forms. But I do have to say, I like the direction they were going. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
in terms of like this big guy.
Yeah, this
Big
big
guy.
this big pig boy.
And then after you defeat
Well,
him,
hold on. The boss fight against Ganon is really impressive. You have to utilize so many, like all good boss fights in so many good games, you have to utilize so many of your past and previously acquired skills and upgrades in order to defeat him. He can swing his trident around, he can teleport, he can turn invisible, he can spawn fire bats, he destroys the arena. Yeah, it's a really awesome boss fight, and the final stage of the fight, you have to light up the torches or sconces around the arena in order to reveal his location. Then you can stun him and then shoot him with an arrow off the edge. And that's how you finally defeat him.
And now with Ganon defeated, the where does Link go to a place, or does the Triforce literally just drop on his plate?
He goes to the Triforce. It's in this like green curtain stage area, and the Triforce speaks to Link and says, "Whoever wields the Triforce has the power to make all their wishes come true. Ganon had used the Triforce in the Dark World to seize control, but you, Link, what will you use it for?" And in this moment, Link's pure of heart makes his wish for all peace to be restored to Hyrule, for all the maidens to return to their families, for the king to return to the throne, and for all those lost to Ganon's evil deeds and machinations to be restored. And throughout the end credits of the game, the epilogue, you see everyone in Hyrule having their happily ever after. Zelda has returned to her father, the king. The lost boy in the woods who was turned into a tree has returned to his father. Everyone is
The
just,
priest is back.
yeah, the priest is back. Your uncle is still
Uncle's
alive.
back. Yeah. We
Yeah,
never really hear from him again.
yeah. It's just a classic fairy tale ending after Ganon has been slain and dethroned. His stench of evil removed from this world due to Link's actions.
And it's really kind of beautiful. It's kind of like a poetic ending to this roller coaster of action and suspense, and as well as adventure that you went on. I'm sure as a little kid, like many people have, this is where they knew they loved the fantasy setting. I feel like this was the gateway into many people loving the fantasy genre and really propelled that, and then into more open world RPG games.
Like we've said many times, it encapsulated everything you want out of an adventure game. This is the adventure game, especially for this generation of consoles. It
Mm-hmm.
set the template for not just the Zelda series, but so many games going forward. And I personally consider it to be one of the most influential and important games of the genre. It's just a straightforward Zelda fairy tale adventure, and that's all it had to be, and it nailed it in every step of the way.
And I appreciate the hard work of the team that put it together. And that goes for all the games we've covered so far. We
And
do
not
appreciate
there's
your
one of them.
yeah, we got it.
It's there. I'm just all the games we've covered, and I'm like, I just want to thank each and every, not you, all of you games for. But yeah, Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, a tried and true classic.
It's very fun, and you, our listeners, should definitely give it a try.
All I have left to say is fuck them magic floorboards that fly off and attack
Oh
you.
God, no kidding. Like it was literally hell running into those rooms.
All right, that's all we got to say about this game. Thank you everyone for listening, and as always, if you want to ask us a question or leave us any feedback or just get in touch with us, then email us at backwardscompatiblepod@gmail.com. I've been your host Chase, signing off.
And I've been Garrett. Hope to see you again soon.
Da, 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 da.